transcribing as well. So if there's something you missed that I say, you can just check the transcription later on and I'll send it out as well. All right, sweet. And I'll post our code of conduct. Here, I'll just type that in. So for those of you that are just joining in now, if you wanted to keep your cameras on, that's perfectly fine. This isn't like a very formal webinar or workshop where I'm posing myself out to be a diversity and inclusion expert in tech, but I am someone who tries to be very educated with all the free and paid resources that are out there, and one of them is on Microsoft Learn. So let's keep this super casual. You can keep your mics on, video on, interrupt me if you have something to add, and we can have some discussion around that. I'm currently joining from Toronto, Canada. I'd love to know where other people are joining from. So if you are from somewhere that's not in Canada, please message in the chat or let me know. It'd be cool to know. California, that's cool. What time is in California? It's PST there, right? Pacific Standard Time. So that's New York. Okay, sweet. So it's East Coast for us, which means it's 12 in the daytime, so it's 12 p.m. And I brought my lunch. I was eating kebabs for lunch, so I have them next to me, and I was just eating while waiting to start. Noonish, lunchish. Okay, sweet, makes sense. Oh, UK. What time is it in the UK? I am so bad with time zones. But yeah, like for the reactor, which is currently where I work, all our events are spread across all the different time zones. So we have like this time zone checker that every time we have an event, I put it in the time zone checker to kind of share it across the other locations. So I never know it off the top of my head.
They're moving one body.
Hi, Joyce. Oh, you're eating oatmeal? Okay, wait, here, I'll share my kebab. I don't know if people can see, but I was eating kebab and ketchup for lunch. Okay, sweet. Well, we can move on from there. So since I work for Microsoft, there's a ton of learning resources out there that I've personally been taking to be more aware and be more of an active ally, and I'm trying to be more mindful of that every day. So, you know, I've been more aware about that, trying to take those courses, and even selfishly, I just want to be more employable as well. And I think that's a really important skill set, even for the workplace right now, to say that you're someone who actively engages and is trying to be more inclusive and be more diverse. So selfishly, I'm also trying to do that. So anyway, the fact that you're coming out today is a great first step, and it could be a great resource for you wherever you are in that journey. If you're looking to be a better designer or a better people manager or create more inclusive content, maybe you write blogs online, whatever the case may be, attending today is a good first step. So how I've set this up is kind of to spend a little bit of time chatting about why we should learn about disability and accessibility. These aren't from my own words. This is all kind of parsed through from information that's, you know, put together by experts online, and I'll share all the content afterwards. And after that, we'll go through the MSLearn module together, which will take about 2-3 minutes. It's very quick. And hopefully get ourselves a completion badge. So how that works is that Microsoft Learn, and I'll go through this a little bit later on, Microsoft Learn is this online hub. It's kind of like LinkedIn Learning or Coursera or Udemy, if some of you have taken courses there. And once you take a course, you get a completion badge or a trophy that you can share either on your LinkedIns or on your resumes, saying that you're certified to be a certain type of professional or you've completed some education in a specific thing. So we'll be doing that together. We can all share our answers and do it together so we don't have any troubles. So yeah, we'll, you know, go through about the why, get the badge, and my goal hopefully is that everyone who's in the call today completes that first module in the accessibility fundamentals learning path. So how the learning path works is that you have the umbrella term of accessibility fundamentals, and within that there's 3 or 4 modules, and I'll kind of go through the content so we don't have to read the whole module together. So it's kind of like a summarized version of everything there. And hopefully we all learned one new thing today. All right, sweet. So a little bit about me. I'm the Reactor Program Manager for Toronto. So I'm sure you guys or you folks joined this event from some meetup page or Twitter or somewhere on LinkedIn, maybe. So I manage the Toronto location. It's super fun. I've been doing that for about 2 years now, just under 2 years. And And it's been a fun time. I think ever since COVID started, everyone's been working from home. So all our events have been virtual. So I haven't been going out to this physical space as much, but it's been a fun time. Outside of work, I created this B Corp that creates children's literature and programming. And so I work on that in my free time, which I have very little of. And I try to be a STEAM mentor and advocate for schools and different organizations, trying to learn about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm hoping to be better at illustration. I bought an iPad and Procreate, and I'm trying to be better, but I'm still an amateur. So yeah, that's kind of been my goal. That's kind of been my goal for the new year, is to hopefully be a little bit better at illustrating things. And if that's someone else's goal, we actually have this series that we're doing. It's called Visualize IT, and I think we've already done 5 of them. We only have 1 session left for it, at least this set of series, where we teach you how to either visualize concepts and communicate ideas that are really complex, or even just like learn how to use the iPad Procreate app, or take notes, or be like a graphic recorder, like, you know, those folks that attend a conference and then make like a bunch of notes about it. So yeah, it's been really fun. I've selfishly just put that on with like a bunch of speakers because it would help me as well. And yeah, and fun fact, it's my birthday in 2 days. I'm turning 26, so I'm still very young, but I feel very old. Anyways, so to start off, why this really matters is that there's 1.5 billion people in the world with disabilities. Among them, 80% of them live in developing countries. And for Canada, what that means is that 1 in 7 people, or almost like 4.5 million Canadians, live with a disability. And the concept of disability might be a stereotype that you might have like vague understanding of. There might only be like a physical disability, maybe person or people who use wheelchairs only, but disabilities and accessibility kind of spans a whole bunch of concepts. Oh, thank you. Thanks for your birthday wishes. What if you all already aware of disability from personal experience? Yeah, you might already be aware of disability and how it affects you in your day-to-day life from your own personal experience, whether that's yourself, your family. So your understanding of it might already be very thorough. So going back to kind of what it means in a Canadian context, so 1 in 7 folks already experience or live with or are surrounded by someone who has a disability. And in the next 9 years, so by 2030, that's going to go up to 1 in 5. So if you're in a room with 5 people, at least one of them will be someone who has disability or accessibility issues. And as you know, societies are aging and disability is becoming an even more prominent feature of life, that you can't avoid that. I think everyone will have to consider it. This is globally considered not just a human rights concern, but also a sustainable development priority for a lot of countries. And it's one of the pillars for the UN as well. People with accessibility issues or disabilities might define the term accessibility or disability in their own ways. So there's a really popular theory called the social model of disability. It was made by a professor who's kind of like a leader in this field at the University of Kent in the UK, who suggested that it's your society or the environment that's disabling the individual rather than their own impairment or difference, which is something that I believe as well. I feel like there's a ton of barriers structurally that affect folks rather than their own disability per se. For example, people with, this is just a tiny example of it, videos without subtitles disadvantage most people some of the time, but you know, like they're watching in a noisy environment or something. So that's one way that they're, you know, sometimes impaired, but they disadvantage deaf people all the time. So that's one way that, you know, some folks who are disabled might be experiencing disability and access issues all the time, whilst other folks only experience it some of the time. So going to the most common definition, because everyone defines it in their own ways, accessibility means you're creating experiences for people of all abilities. It's a concept of whether a product or service can be used by everyone and have an equal user experience, however they encounter it. So let me just quickly check the chat. Visualize it link, please. Yeah, I'll send you the link. Oh, Christian, if you're not seeing this closed captioning, I believe on Teams there's like 3 dots on the top ribbon bar. If you turn that on, hopefully it should let you see that. My view is a little bit different than the attendee view, so please bear with me. All right, great. So one important takeaway is that accessible designs help everyone. Accessibility isn't only the right thing to do, but it often brings benefits to all users, even if you don't have a disability. Because, like, for example, I gave that video caption example. It helps people with hearing difficulties, but it also helps the person who's watching the video on mute or in a loud area or at a concert or something. Another example, if you have legible high contrast text on your content, it also helps people with vision difficulties, but it also helps people who have perfect eyesight, but they're using their phone in like bright sunlight, or they're using it in the desert or something where it's really hard to see. So many users, whatever their abilities, will face challenges due to these demanding contexts. So when you design or you create something or you're doing anything for all ability levels, you create stuff that anyone can use and finds helpful or calming or whatever it may be. And so on this slide, there's many different types of accessibility issues. I've only put a couple of them, some of the more common ones. There's other issues that are more like class-based. So if you're high income versus low income, you have different issues, social issues, built-in political issues. But yeah, these are some common ones like visual, hearing, cognitive, which would be, brain-based, speech, like you have a speech impediment, mobility issues, which are a little bit more common and more visible for some folks, but it can also be invisible, neural disabilities. So if you have ADHD, for example, or depression, those are actually considered disability issues. So those are things that you will impair your day-to-day life in some form of aspect or in some context. But one thing to actually mention is that it's not just about disability, there's also something called ability barriers, which could be something like sleep deprivation. So if you are sleep deprived one night, the next day you will be impaired in some context. So you might need like focus assist, or you might need alarm set, or you might need like magnifier or something, or like something like a Siri in your phone telling you, oh, this is your reminders for today or something. So those are like ability-based barriers. One more could be like an environmental barrier, like you're using a mobile device, but it's not working because you're underground, so you need something else. So, oh, thanks for helping out, Susanna. I can't really see your message, but let me know if you still can't see the captions. All right, so but yeah, so here's just a couple of them, but there's a ton more. You can feel free to look those up or ask me, I'll send some more links. But from the module, basically, which you're going to be taking on later, I kind of condensed it down. Accessibility, we chatted about it. It's a word used to describe whether a product can be used by people of all abilities. And disability, this is kind of wordy, but it's a mismatch in interaction between the features of a person's body and the features of the environment in which they live, which kind of basically means it's a mismatch between a person and their surroundings. Surroundings could be caused by other people, like just physical surroundings, like there's no ramp for something. So that's just a mismatch between the environment and the person. But the good thing is that technology can play a big part in breaking down some of these barriers and making things accessible to everyone. Some people with disabilities may use assistive technology to perform tasks. And assistive technology is basically any item, piece of equipment, a software program, or a product that's used to increase, maintain, or improve their functional capabilities, especially for people with disabilities. So that's kind of a wordy definition as well, but it's from the module, so I didn't want to change it up. But yeah, it's basically just a very helpful piece of technology. For example, someone with low vision may use magnifier in Windows 10 that helps magnify their windows. They can enlarge text and view different content. Another thing would be a person with low vision can also use like speech recognition to navigate a computer and do things. So how a person uses technology is really dependent on a variety of factors, including the person, their environment, and their goals. For example, while one person with low vision might use magnifier, another person might use narrator, which narrator is basically like this program which narrates everything that's happening, kind of like, when you use closed captioning sometimes on TVs with narration, it'll define what's happening in the TV show. It's very similar and is based off our computer. Other folks might use quiet hours versus focus assist, which are two different things on Windows as well. And these might be completely things that you might not have ever heard of before, but there's like built-in programs in many devices, and I'm only talking about like Windows devices right now, that you can use to feel a little bit more supported. But two things I do want to add that many people often, exclude when they're talking about disability are temporary disabilities. For example, if you fracture a finger, you are limited in how you're typing, how you're working. So you might use like speech recognition to help you out. So that's not something that people consider a disability, but it is a temporary disability, and it is something that impairs your day-to-day life in some way. So it's something to actually keep in mind. The other one is situational exclusion. And you don't need to know this definition. It basically just means you're in a situation which is affecting your ability to perform a task or do anything, which could be, something like holding a baby, breastfeeding, a couple more things I can't really think of right now, but it's just in some way that you're excluded from a situation. I'll check the chat quickly. What if you have bad dexterity? That really. Oh, JP, is folks, can people mute? Okay, yeah, if you could mute if you're not speaking. JAWS and Lunar Plus program. Yeah, if you have some examples, please put them in the chat that folks can check out later on as well. All right, let's go to the next slide. So one thing that's really important, especially when talking about disability and accessibility, is language and etiquette. Words have a lot of power, and using positive language around disability does help folks be more inclusive, and it's really important to keep in mind just, as a respect thing as well. There's a couple of things. So one thing is that as a best practice, it's recommended to use people first language whenever possible. Like, for example, you would say something like a person with a disability instead of saying disabled person, because that puts the people first, and their disability comes second. You wouldn't say a person, you would say a person with a vision disability instead of saying a blind person or a visually impaired person. You wouldn't really say anything that's outdated or offensive, like saying handicapped or mute or wheelchair bound. I think those kind of, as society, those have kind of been outdated and are a little offensive as well. But even though that people first language is recommended as kind of a best practice, people and individuals have their own preferences. So some people prefer identity first language. So they might prefer saying, oh, I'm an autistic person, or instead of saying like, I'm a person with autism. So everyone has their own preference. So there really isn't like the right way to do something. It's more so there's, people first is kind of like considered socially preferable, and then individuals have their own preferences as well. So I think the best thing to do is just have the right intent. And, if you are corrected by someone or you make a mistake, just accept it, ask for the suggestion of what is correct, and move on. It's always best to ask in every scenario. And one more thing is that, it's kind of expected, but you may or may not always be able to tell if someone has a disability. There's many invisible illnesses, like someone having Crohn's disease, or other types of disabilities where you can't visually tell if someone has a disability or not. Regardless, you have to treat everybody with respect and include them in your conversations, in your meetings, and your events. You shouldn't really make assumptions of their ability to perform, or if they need any special support to be able to perform at that same level, whether that's extra time on tests or anything. Just best not to make any assumptions about folks. So one thing to keep in mind, or some examples to keep in mind, is, for example, if you're in a meeting and there's a person who is blind in that meeting and asks a question, you still answer as if you're talking to that person, and you look at them and respond that way versus looking at other people who are sighted and responding, and because it's just a little disrespectful to them. If a person is deaf and they have a sign language interpreter with them, you still make eye contact and speak directly to that person versus speaking to the interpreter. The interpreter is basically like an aid there in that case. They don't speak for the person, they just kind of help translate what they're saying. Another kind of important thing to mention is that you should never touch people's guide dogs. Don't touch any kind of accessibility technology that they're using. There's so many different tools and things out there on the world that you can use when you're making your content. If you're posting something online or you're writing a book or anything like that, there's so many tools that can help you be a little bit more accessible that are almost like a one touch away. And so it's kind of a no-brainer if you want to be, especially in 2021 now, just take that extra minute to make sure you're being inclusive. I have another event, kind of this part of this series of D&I series. I think it's in a couple weeks, where we'll actually go through kind of things like PowerPoint and Excel and Word and how to make those programs more accessible. And when you're, having a meeting or making a slide deck, how do you make it accessible? If you'd like, after this session, I can show you, even for this deck I'm presenting today, there was a couple of things that came up that said, oh, this isn't accessible, this isn't accessible. And I left them in so that we could go through it later on if you'd like. There's many very simple ways to check, but anyway, we'll move on. I really like this quote where it says, disability is part of the human experience, but inclusion is a choice. All of our bodies will change over time. We all deserve dignity and access at every stage of our lives. Some people, like most people, will actually seek accessibility solutions at some point, whether it's for themselves, a family member, coworker, doesn't matter. It's kind of, part of the human experience. So we all need to do that work and engage to make that world accessible for everyone. But what that means is that you need to be inclusive, and that's a choice that you have to make actively. It's like a verb, it's an action verb. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Diversity and inclusion are two kind of interconnected concepts, but they're not interchangeable. Like you couldn't say, oh, I'm a diversity and inclusion expert, because diversity is very different and inclusion is very different. So it's two very different things. So you can't just say inclusion is the same. So if you're being like, oh, I'm so inclusive or something, it doesn't mean the same thing. So for example, diversity is about the representation or the makeup of an entity. So it's about who's in that entity. For example, I don't know if you guys know, or you folks might not know this for those who are joining from not from Canada, but Justin Trudeau had this very infamous, Justin Trudeau is our prime minister. He had this very infamous thing when he became part of the office where he said, oh, I want a cabinet that's 50% male and 50% female. So that's one form of gender-based diversity, but of course that doesn't really include, how many people of color are there, or people with disability issues or anything like that. It's just, very simple, straightforward gender-based diversity. But inclusion is really about how well the contributions and the presence and perspectives of different people are valued and integrated in an environment. So, in an environment where there's all types of people, it's super diverse, where there's, people who have different races and they have different sexual orientation identities, or they're different nationalities, like different parts of the world, that's great. But if only one or two types of people have any actual value or authority in that environment, then it's not very inclusive at all. So you might notice this a lot at your workplace where it's super diverse, but really the decision makers are maybe one type of group of folks, So that's something to keep in mind. So a workplace can be very diverse. It looks great, like the photo has all and every type of person in there. But if people only listen to one type of person, then it's not inclusive at all. There's a really famous quote that I put on the slide by a leader in the D&I world. Her name's Verna Myers. She said, diversity is being asked to the party while inclusion is being asked to dance. And I think that's a pretty good segue. It's kind of that first step into kind of differentiating it in your mind. Obviously, it's super simplified quote. There's so much more that goes into it, but I think it's important to kind of make that distinction clear. All right, let's go to the module again. Here, let me just check the quotes. I must do an update to get the. Yeah, Christian, I'll go through some of those after and we can do it. Disability, like hearing and others. Yeah. Majority of disabilities are hidden. Yeah, that's very true. A lot of them are very hidden. You wouldn't see them. Only I think physical disabilities might be a little more apparent, but even from those, there's so many hidden ones and invisible illnesses that you wouldn't know. You wouldn't be able to tell right away. Anyways, so from the module, how MSLearn defines inclusion is to be inclusive means to embrace diversity from the very beginning. And this is obviously in more of a tech context, but you embrace disability from the very beginning, from the earliest planning stages of a product to its launch to its latest updates. It should be built in as part of the product versus bolted on at the end. If accessibility is kind of an afterthought, especially when it comes to like product design or hosting an event or something, the changes are either rushed or they're not high priority. They're kind of seen as low priority. People will have people with disabilities will have an inferior experience and feel excluded. Like even if it's something as simple as going to a concert, and that check-in process is like everyone needs to kind of show their ticket, and you're standing, 2 hours in line to get into the concert. That's a shitty experience, pardon my language. It's a horrible experience for folks who might have mobility issues and they can't stand in line for that long. So they're not going to have a great time at the concert. So they should maybe have a separate check-in, or maybe build out the process so it's not like you're standing in line for that long. So that's a better experience for everybody who's in line versus, just some folks. So yeah, those are just some ways that day-to-day life could be affected. A technology tool example of this would be maybe, students and faculty using the Microsoft Translator app. So if the teacher is delivering some content, they can either use their phone mic or just have a headset or mic or something where they're delivering some lecture. And then the translator app or a live captions app is kind of putting captions on something. So people who are hard of hearing can follow along in the same way as people who aren't hard of hearing. And if you're maybe an international student or something like that, where you can speak English or whatever the content is in, but maybe you don't understand it as fast as other folks are, maybe you don't understand the subtleties or something, you can use the translator app to kind of convert those live captions in real time to understand it the same way as other people are understanding it. So there's just some ways that you can be more inclusive of different types of people in different environments. And for a teacher, it's very simple to just press a button and turn on captions on your lectures, or have a phone or a mic, capturing those captions. But for a student, that could be extremely helpful. So I think those are just some ways that technology can help you in day-to-day life. Next. So I wanted to quickly chat about MSLearn because that's what we'll be going through today. Basically, Microsoft Learn is a free online training platform that has interactive learning for obviously a ton of Microsoft products and technologies, but it also has external technologies that are out there, and there's a ton of fun, guided, hands-on, and interactive content that's maybe could be specific to your role or goals. So for example, if you're a developer or a project manager, there's role-based learning. Like if you're a project manager, these are kind of some tools that would really help you out so you can learn about those things. But you can also have learning paths for specific things. So if you are, a project manager and you want to learn and upgrade yourself for the next job or a pay grade, or you want to switch careers or something, what skills are in demand because it's in that learning path. So you can spend some time learning specifically that versus learning something that's completely irrelevant and will just kind of be fun for you to learn, but it's not really helping you in your career per se. But they also have learning paths for specific technologies like Power BI. So you could just learn everything about Power BI and learn about data and everything to do with that. And whatever you want to do with that, you can. So it's really fun. It's a really fun and free resource. But what we did today was one module from the Accessibility Fundamentals learning path. So for example, we did the Intro to Disability and Accessibility unit, which includes 3 units on accessibility, disability, and inclusion. So we chatted about that today very quickly, but I think I kind of covered most of the topic points, and we'll all do the quiz together at the end. There's just a 3-question quiz, but once you do that quiz, you'll be completing, one part of these 4 parts of the learning path. And once you complete the learning path, you'll get the trophy that you can see on the slide there. And once you have the trophy, that's kind of like to show that, hey, I've done some of the work to show that, I am learning, I'm putting myself out there and being more aware and being educated. So you can put that trophy on your LinkedIn or your resume or whatever it is that you use in the workplace or in the job market or anything like that. So it can really help you out. So today we only went through one of those modules, but I'm doing this series almost every week for the next 2 months, I believe. So next week we'll be going through the next module, and obviously I'll add a little bit to that as well. And then hopefully by the end of it, we'll get the full trophy to get the Accessibility Fundamentals one. After we get this, I believe I'm doing one on like inclusive marketing, inclusive product design, and a whole bunch of other ones. So hopefully you guys can join me for that. Some further learning from here. I don't want to talk for too long, but some resources and links that I'll share afterwards. Especially when you're learning about diversity and inclusion, you can sometimes feel like there's just so much to know and some of it's conflicting and you're like, okay, this is a lot. Where do I start? Do I just read people's tweets? So, it's kind of hard to go through. So I put some links together, and I'll keep adding to this, in the YouTube video or something, so that people can have some options. But whether you're trying to, up your game or become a supportive ally or have a more inclusive workplace at your company, there's a lot you can do. So the first link there, it has some online courses that you can take. Right now, some are paid, some are free. Like today's is a free one. There's events and online events that are happening to kind of learn and have some opportunities there. There's some educational tech products and tools you can use. Maybe like consultants, if you are someone who is kind of a decision maker at your company, or you want to suggest something that needs to be done at your company, you can suggest some consultants there. There's some documentaries that I listed there to watch on accessibility and inclusion. There's some places to shop from, spend your money, consciously where you are shopping. A link on how to be an ally for the community. A really cool article by this woman named Haben Gurma, who was part of Obama's, a change maker for Obama. She's, I think, one of the first deaf and blind people to be part of the cabinet or something like that. I'm sure I'm getting her story wrong, but she wrote this amazing article that kind of became like a game changer for the disability community. It's called People with Disabilities Drive Innovation. I'll share that as well. And then the last one I think is really important. It's something called Nothing About Us Without Us. And it's like this big mantra that came out of the movement, which basically expresses that people with disabilities, that they know what's best for them. This is super important because people with disabilities need to be front and center as kind of visible leaders to share their voices, share their experiences, and it also matters because people without disabilities, able-bodied people in any context, they should be reinforced as an ally to these people with disabilities by giving them those opportunities and removing some barriers so that they can make those decisions, whether it's at work or anything else, So yeah, it unites us with all the marginalized and invisible individuals and groups who deserve and are demanding a seat at the table. So it really matters because, people with disabilities need to be the ones whose voices lead the way for themselves. For example, people in, like the entertainment industry, people with disabilities need to represent themselves. So if there's a person with disability who can be cast for a role, you should probably cast them for the role versus another actor to play someone with a disability. So yeah, being visible is really important. And now let's do, I think I've kind of gone through most of this. Hamad has a comment. What about being an accessible consultant to different companies and governments? Yes, that's definitely an option. I think being a consultant does require a level of expertise. So I think just doing this course wouldn't be you wouldn't be a good consultant, I feel like. I think you should probably do a little bit more, either have lived experiences so that you can speak to your own experiences and use those to drive change, or you should do some type of formal or informal education to kind of drive that. So I think that's really important if you are being a consultant to something about, something being more diverse or some government body being more diverse and inclusive. And I think I see some folks are typing. Is anyone working on accommodation on this call? I think accommodation has many contexts. Could you elaborate, JP, in what context?
Yeah, just working on
we can't really hear you. Could you maybe raise your volume or something?
Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah, it's a little bit better.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm keeping the volume low. What I'm curious about is any individuals who are helping folks broker accommodation conversations for individuals with disabilities, or have any experience with that.
Okay, makes sense. So I don't know if everyone heard, but basically they were saying that if you have any experience being a broker for accommodation for people, please type it in the chat below. If not, JP, once we put the recording up, I'll definitely put that ask out there so you can check the comments if anybody, suggests if they are brokering conversations between individuals. Yeah, makes sense. So more like mediation in a certain way. I know some great organizations that do good work here, like Crescendo Work is pretty good. They're a Toronto founded D&I company. But obviously, I think you're looking for more of an individual. So I hope you find them, or self-advocacy. Okay, we can put the ask out also on Meetup if that, find some folks for you. All right, so let's go to the last slide actually, which is just the knowledge check. So if you could go to this link, and I'll go as well. Here, I'll put it in the chat. So if we all go to this link, this is where we can actually module. Oops, pardon me. I just hit my fork. We can all go to this module and take the quiz together. You can unmute yourself. And here, I'll share my screen. There. Can everyone see my screen? Yes? No? Yes? Okay, sweet.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, this is kind of the module that we walked through today. It includes kind of the main topics that we went through. And you'll notice that it has 600 XP. So as you collect experience points for a certain module, it gives you the trophy at the end once you completed it. So I've already gone through it, but what it looks like is basically, context, and then you kind of just scroll through different topics. But we can do the knowledge check together. So obviously this is very, very simple, but I'd love it if we could all do it together. And if you have any questions, we can chat about them. So the first one was, what is accessibility? Here, I'll just zoom in a bit. Super simple. I think, yeah, whether a product can be used by people of all abilities. If you're communicating with a person who's deaf and who has a sign language interpreter, who should you speak to? Always speak directly to the person. Which of the following is an example of person first language? You would just say the person would come first. So you would say a person with low vision instead of something else. So you can check your answers. Yep, all questions correct. You would go to the next page and it would just say, great, you've learned about XYZ, right? And that should be it. So if you could all go there, maybe you might have to make an account or something, and let me know if you have any trouble. You can just unmute or even share your own screen if you'd like. But yeah, so that's just part one. If we go back to accessibility fundamentals learning path. So this one, I mean, I've kind of gone through it already, but this one we just went through 5 units about it. Next week, same time, Tuesday at 12 for my time. So basically this exact time next week, I'll be going through features and tools, which would be key accessibility and tools built into Microsoft products. So like Windows 10, PowerPoint, Translator, we'll go through them and just how to make things more inclusive that you are using almost every day is very helpful. So we'll even go through some gaming features and tools like Xbox tools. And that should help, and we'll take the quiz together then as well. After that, creating tools, we'll go through that, like on Word, PowerPoint, Excel. So it's kind of like part 2 of last week's. And then after that, we'll go through this digital accessibility, which is creating things for apps and for the web, so like actual websites. Oh, enjoy your clubs. Thanks, JP. But yeah, so then we'll go through these. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we'll be going through in the next few weeks. Hamad, you have multiple lived experiences of disability. Yeah, that's great. If you do, then I feel like just having some more lived experience, you can speak to things with much more truth. You can relate to a lot of things and add your own personal experiences. I see a few more folks are typing. And yeah, I put a survey link in the chat. If you have any feedback on today's session, please let me know. I'll be reading them. If you don't want me to read them, I'll let my manager read them, and we can chat about it. But yeah, so that's kind of it for today's, at least, content. Did you have any questions about maybe specific language or anything like that? I'm happy to chat. I mean, there's 15 minutes left for today's time. So if you wanted to unmute or show your video or just hang out and eat lunch, feel free. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me today. So Hamad, it seems like you're interested in being more involved in the disability and diversity community, being more of an advocate, I feel like. Thanks, Martina. Thanks, Yolanda. Thank you, Pearl. Thanks. I mean, I'm no expert by any means, but I'm grateful for you joining regardless. More reader material. Yeah, I'll definitely share the slides and the recording in the same, like all the different meetup groups, and it'll be on this YouTube channel actually. Here, I have a link for it. And I'll keep adding links to that so you can always refer back. And then you can always just message me directly and we can chat about it. Give more detail on people with low vision. Yeah, for sure. So I mean, low vision is a big topic, but I think that really refers to any folks that have difficulty with low vision. So that could include, let me go back to my slide actually. Here. Here, let me just. Christian, thank you. This is great. I'm having to update things to access the quiz, but now I know what to expect. Okay, I'm glad. Yeah, it's very quick. It's like a 3-4 question thing usually, especially this module is super easy to kind of take that first step. So I'm grateful. But yeah, to answer your question, Nitesh, visual and low vision issues can kind of cover a whole range of things, but it could be things like being colorblind. You could just have low vision, like you have difficulty with, like, for example, I have low vision with my glasses, but I'm not impaired in any way because I can just wear these glasses and I'm perfectly fine. And I can, take them off and still see fairly well. But for folks that have a really high prescription, without their glasses, they have, a really hard time navigating the world. Like they can't walk around properly, like things don't look how they look. Some people have really low vision to the point of they can only see shadows and light. And so with either some sort of serious procedures, they're able to see, or that's just how their vision is. But there's, ways to mitigate that or ways to support it, but there might not be any ways to support it as well. So for those folks, they might use maybe a guide or a guide dog, or they might just navigate the world, with technology. Color blindness is actually considered a vision impairment. Being fully blind is obviously one of the biggest forms of visual impairments. Even actually, if you have one eye that's fully functioning and one that doesn't, it does impair you because it has, I think, throws off your balance and you might have vertigo and things like that. So even if you're fully sighted, you can see the world as everybody else. If you only have one eye that's fully functioning, it still impairs you because you're not, used to the world as you are with two eyes. So yeah, there's many different ways, but I can probably find some more here. Types of yeah, night blindness is a thing where you can't see in the night. That's a thing that I learned about for the first time. Light sensitivity is also a thing. A lot of people have eyesight where going out in the sun is extremely harmful to them, where they get very hard migraines. So even if they can see properly, because of their sensitive eyes, they get horrible migraines. So even if their impairment is not eye related, it's migraine related, it's caused by vision impairment. So I think there's a bunch of different examples. I'm obviously no expert in this topic, but I think if you Google just visual impairments and disabilities, you'll find a ton of stuff out there. Sweet. But yeah, if you're interested in completing the path with me, we can all just do it together. Join me for this time next workshop. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'm happy to answer them, or happy to find some resources for certain things. If you are having difficulty kind of going through so many different links on stuff, I'm happy to do it. Happy to do the work and send you the link after. But thank you. So if there's no more questions, we can end 10 minutes early, get some time back. Yeah, doesn't look like. Thanks, Yolanda. All right. Bye, everyone. You have some questions later on? Yep, sounds good. Feel free to reach out anywhere. If you saw on Meetup, you can just reach out to me there. Or here's my Twitter, and my LinkedIn is the same. My LinkedIn is just Ayman A. You could just message me there. Sweet. Thanks, everyone. I'll stop recording and captions and stuff like that now.